results in intelligibility. Well, God is the origin of unity and diversity. He is both the one and the many. He then creates a world that reflects the one and the many, unity and diversity, and consequently there is intelligibility.
Well, I think that we are God or his children? Or
no, God is that which constitutes the ground of being. The mind, the purpose, the plan of God dictates all that is and cannot be. So the idea that we would be aspects of God's existence is pantheism, and pantheism says all is God, or panentheism. And either of those used, pantheism or panentheism, are incoherent and cannot be justified.
Why can pantheism not be justified? Just curious.
Because their God would not. Well, first of all, ontologically, that God concept would be that God would be insane because he argues with himself. He schmurders himself. He grapes himself. Okay, if I'm a part of God and you're a part of God, then the atheist is a part of God, and we're contradicting each other. So the God of pantheism would be schizophrenic.
Well, respectfully, can't a mind be schizophrenic? Can't a single mind be schizophrenic? So why couldn't a single?
Well, then God would not be the sum of all perfections. Okay. And then if God is not the sum of all perfections, then without that foundation, it destroys the possibility of intelligibility. So either it is the case that the ground of all being is the sum of all perfections, being a foundation, a basis for rational predication. And if there isn't a foundation of ultimate perfection, then there won't be a basis for rational predication.
I see.
So there are two ways of understanding it, both the ontological and epistemological. Ontological has to do with the fundamental nature of being is. Epistemological has to do with how we know what we know. They both depend upon each other. Okay? So without an ultimate ontological state of perfection, that is God, it destroys any notions of ontology or theory of knowledge outside of that model of reality.
Okay, that makes sense.
So any other model of reality that is spoken of, either directly or indirectly, that is not the Christian worldview, will implode upon examination to utter confusion and incoherency. Okay? Only the Christian worldview is coherent.
Okay, I have another question. What do you think about the possibility that that God might have sent out other manifestations to other cultures at different times, such that he presented himself in a way that was understandable to that culture at that time, and then that may have become a completely different religion? Do you think those?
No, because that would be inconsistent with the Christian worldview codified in the Bible, and therefore thereby contradicting the Christian worldview, and therefore it would be operating from a different worldview, which would be incoherent, because any other worldview that is not founded and undergirded by the perfection of the triune self-revealing God of the Bible will be ultimately uninterpretable and incoherent.
Okay, well, I only ask because a lot of these other religions also have a triple God type of.
No, there is no other model of reality that has the attribute set of the triune God of the Bible. There is no religion that advocates for that. Don't confuse tritheism versus a unified one God who subsists as three distinct seats of intellect persons. No other religion does that.
Okay.
So that's why we can know, and we can know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Christianity is true, because it has it has the positive characteristics of being true, the positive representation that it is true, conjoined with the impossibility of its rational denial by invoking an alternative worldview. Okay? Christianity is true by its own internal positive representation, with the impossibility of its rational denial by invoking an alternative worldview.
Can you explain that more? How
Yes, so because it doesn't have a ontological foundation. Okay, so what is possible will be dictated by the ground of all being, and the ground of all being will have to be the sum of all perfections as characterized by the attribute set of the Christian God in order to actualize and sustain all that is and is not, and do so intelligibly and coherently. Remove the Christian God and its attribute set from the equation, and then you won't be able to have an intelligible, rationally defensible articulation of an alternative model of reality.
I understand.
So Christianity is the only possible rational worldview. Why? Because of the attribute set of the Christian God that he has revealed. Don't accept that, and you're instantly operating and speaking from an alternative worldview, which you're going to have to explain. But upon examination, it's not going to be undergirded by the sum of all perfections, which the God of the Bible alone possesses. So reject the revelation of the self-revealing triune God of the Bible, then you have some splaining to do. But it's going to end in disaster.
Okay. But what are those specific characteristics that define that?
He's eternal, he's absolute, unconditionally non-dependent, non-derivative, omniscient, omnipotent, always truth-revealing. He is a God of love. Okay? He is the sum of all perfections. He is the God of all great-making properties. He is the greatest conceivable being, of which none greater can be conceived.
Okay. Well, that sounds amazing. I'm just going to add my perspective that the first thing I studied was Hinduism, and it talks about the Bhagavan, which is the omnipotent deity that has basically the same characteristics that you just listed.
Wrong. So, you're woefully uninformed about this.
That's fine.
Okay, so in Hinduism, Brahman, who is God as all, is unknowable. In classical Hinduism, Brahman is fundamentally and ultimately unknowable.
Okay. Well, I wasn't talking about Brahman. I was talking about the Bhagavan with these 6 immutable characteristics of all wealth, all strength, all knowledge.
I'm just trying to. Okay, so here's the problem. So then the God of pantheism would not be the sum of all perfection because he incorporates evil. So is there actual evil in the world?
I would say so.
Okay, so that is a part. Okay, sir, listen to me. Well, evil would be that which deviates from the sum of all perfections. Okay, evil is that which deviates from the character, the mind, and the purposes of God.
Then yes, there's evil.
Okay, so then in pantheism, then God is not perfect, and if he's not perfect, then it destroys the ability of rational predication. Okay, so unless our world is undergirded by God, who is distinct from his creation, you see, in Christianity, that's referred to as the creator-creature distinction. In pantheism, there is no distinction between creator and creatures. Okay? Because all is Brahman, all is God, and therefore you're gonna have to bite the bullet. You're either gonna have to acknowledge that their evil is real or evil is an illusion.
Gotcha.
Okay, and either way, you're screwed.
Well, didn't God create evil then?
Okay, what evil are you referring to?
Well, did God create Satan?
Satan was an angel that God created, and everything that God created was good. But Satan decided to, through an act of his will, to rebel and became evil after God created him good.
So evil existed independently of God?
No, evil exists in rebellion against God. God is the necessary precondition for everything, but not the sufficient condition. Okay? So Satan was originally created good, and he became evil. Okay?
Okay. But doesn't God, in his omnipotence, doesn't he create the space for evil to exist in the first place?
God created a world that was without deficit or lack. He finished creating thing and he said everything was good, and that included the angelic realm. Then certain agents within his plan, certain angels and humans, decided to rebel, and they became evil. Now, God is responsible for natural evils in that he withholds his common grace, and calamities result, such as earthquakes, famines, tornadoes, and things like that. But these are temporal judgments in order for God to fulfill his plan of redemptive history.
So is it fair to say that the entire universe should be a reflection of God's purity, that evil is something other that was introduced? Is that kind of what you're saying?
The universe is a crystal clear reflection and is emblematic of God's perfection. But the imperfections that we see must be understood within the context that they are a temporal judgment. Because if they are not seen within the context as a temporal judgment from the original pristine order, then we're not going to have a God who is the sum of all perfections, and therefore it will destroy the possibility of intelligibility.
So, how did you find God in the first place?
How do I what?
How did you find God, and how did you get on his path in the first place?
God has made himself real to every person on this planet. All we have to look around, and the world overwhelmingly and uncontroversially appears to be the product of ultimate intentional design, with the impossibility of the contrary. So God has made his existence clear. In addition to that, God has given further revelation of himself through the prophets, ultimately in Jesus, and that has been those truths of his incarnation, death, burial, and resurrection have been providentially preserved propositionally in the Bible as a testimony, a revelation of God, until Jesus comes again and sets up his kingdom and the final judgment.
Okay, do you have insight or advice to someone reading the Bible about what version or other things to think about while reading, or other sources or things?
If you're new to the Bible, then I would recommend that you get a copy of the New International Version. It's an excellent translation when you're starting to read the Bible. If you decide to seriously get into serious Bible study, then you want to get the New American Standard, which is one of the best translation. It's just that the NIV will be easier reading in larger sections than the New American Standard. The New American Standard is not difficult to read, but it's not as fluid because it's striving for accuracy of the Greek and the Hebrew text.
All right. Yeah, I've been reading a few versions. I have the Net Bible and the Literal Standard Version. My wife has the NIV.
The Literal Standard Version? I've never heard of the Literal Standard Version.
Yeah, the LSV.
Okay.
It's probably not very popular. I've only found it on one Bible app, but I kind of found it because I was looking for a more literal version. But I've only gotten up to Numbers. What is that? The fourth book in the Bible. So I was just hoping.
Well, I would start with the New Testament, and then when you get done with the New Testament, then go back in the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament is pivotal and foundational for the New Testament, right? But the Old Testament is preparatory for Jesus coming as the Messiah. Okay. But, years ago, I asked God to answer prayer to show me how I can know without a shadow of a doubt that he is true and that Christianity is true. And God has answered that prayer. Because as I've gotten deeper into the Bible and reading other theological material, he has made it clear that based upon what God has revealed, any alternative model is rationally impossible. It's literally impossible. So that means that the Christian worldview, given the God of the Bible's attribute set that he has revealed to us, being the sum of all perfections, is the only foundation and basis for which to have a rational model of reality.
So I'm curious, because this is something near and dear to me. Do you tie in your spiritual beliefs and practices with like your worldview, like your scientific worldview, or anything like that?
My views on science would fit under the contextualization within the Christian worldview.
Which would be what exactly? Just like a kind of like...
Yeah, science will become meaningless outside of the Christian worldview.
Okay. So in other words, I mean, I kind of agree with you, but I would hope that you could tell me a little bit more. Like,
science requires for its intelligibility several things, one of which is the regularity or uniformity of nature. Okay? The uniformity of nature has to be accounted for in terms of what actualizes it. Unless the uniformity of nature is understood and accepted to operate in virtue of the God of the Bible being the sum of all perfections, who instituted and secures, he sustains the uniformity of nature, then one cannot rationally ground the uniformity of nature.
Okay. So on a more pragmatic level, on a more earthly day-to-day level, do you believe that the institutions of this world are deceiving people about the nature of this creation?
Can you be more specific?
Well, as to the nature of biology, health, astronomy.
Yeah, the Big Bang is a deception foisted by people who are materialist and naturalist, starting with a pre-commitment to the falsity of the revelation of the Bible about the creation and the beginning of the universe. And they're attempting to then bring in a purely materialistic, naturalistic explanation of cosmological origins, or cosmogony. Okay. Number two, the theory of evolution, promulgated by Darwin and held in consensus today, is false. People think that it is powerfully supported, but it is not. The idea that random mutations over millions of years, aided by survival events, constructed the entire genome of the animal kingdom is virtually statistically impossible to occur, even in a universe that would have 1 trillion galaxies.
I agree with you.
So this is called the combinatorial problem, where it's a virtual statistical possibility for mutations aided by incremental survival events to construct the genome of the animal kingdom. This problem is either it's simply ignored, or it's special pleaded away. And so Dr. Eugene Koonin, one of the greatest experts on the theory of evolution and microbiology, in his own book, Defending Evolution, he refers to evolution under the term self-replicating systems, says self-replicating systems are virtually impossible to occur absent a multiverse. In other words, even in a universe, and this man is profoundly educated, he perfectly understands that there may upwards be of at least 1 trillion galaxies out there. Okay? And even with that vast array of galaxies and a certain number of maybe Earth-like planets, he recognizes the virtual statistical possibility of mutations building the genome aided by survival events. So that makes evolution, as it is held in consensus today, dead in the water, and a deception. Now, do I believe the people who are advancing evolution are deliberately trying to deceive people? No, they are deliberately trying to rebel against what God has revealed in the Bible about creation, and deciding to opt for the authority of pure human reason, not undergirded by the revelation of God, to explain ultimate origins.
Okay, everybody, that is it for the day. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed Darth Dawkins. He's always a blessing when he comes on my channel, on my page. And I hope that you learned something and you are blessed. God bless you all. Thanks for coming. See you next time.